It seems like once again Wall Street is taking notice of problems at Star Wars, this time in the way of the Galactic Starcruiser Hotel. But it ties into a bigger problem, one that we covered in a video this morning, as a matter of fact, regarding the recent ratings that just dropped from Nielsen on the Season 3 premiere of The Mandalorian, effectively confirming what SAMBA TV had told us a few weeks back. I'll leave a link to that video at the end of this one. Make sure if you haven't checked it out yet that you go back and watch. Let's get into it. Renegade Online. Well, folks, welcome back. Another great day here at Valiant Renegade. It's good to see everybody out there once again. And if you are like one of the many folks watching this video, not yet subscribed to this channel, please take a moment, hit that little red subscribe button and turn it to gray. Hit that like button, hit that notification bell, share this sucker out on the social medias, and of course, please do leave a comment before you head out the door today. Got a lot to talk about. Let's get into it. An article from The Street. Disney World's Star Wars problem fix is good news for you. Now, typically, you don't want to see the words Star Wars adjacent to the word problem in the same sentence, especially as a headline in a Wall Street publication. The theme park giant made a huge Star Wars bet that hasn't paid off, but it may have a solution that fans will really like. Walt Disney has built a large part of its business around premium pricing. People pay a lot more to spend a single day at Walt Disney World or Disneyland than they do for an annual pass at regional rivals like Six Flags. And the same thing applies to the company's cruise line. Basically, Disney has shown that people will pay a premium for its high-end products, and that's partly because its theme parks and cruise lines have limited capacity. Disney World has a capacity limit, and even with the company holding that limit to a lower number than where it was in the pre-COVID days, the company has no trouble filling its parks. That's why the company thought that a premium Star Wars hotel would make sense. The problem, and it's a really big one, is that there are only so many people who can justify spending $5,000 for a 2-night stay on the Star Wars Galactic Starcruiser. And as a reminder to folks, that Galactic Starcruiser is about the smallest hotel in the entire Walt Disney World enterprise in Florida. It's only got about 100 rooms to it. Disney should have no problem filling a hotel that small with that low a capacity. It's in the park. It's Star Wars related. But yeah, the price is high, but there's another problem going on. According to The Street, Disney misjudged the Star Wars audience. The Galactic Starcruiser is a hotel that offers visitors an immersive 2-night experience. It's unlike anything Disney or any other theme park company has tried, as essentially the entire hotel is a ride or show. Disney's big bet was that there were enough Star Wars fans that could afford a minimum of $5,000 for 2 nights to immerse themselves in George Lucas's world. Yeah, that's the first problem. It's not George Lucas's world. And at first, it seemed like that bet would pay off as early voyages filled up. The problem appears to be that the audience who can afford Star Wars Galactic Starcruiser and is willing to justify the expense is limited. It also seems like those willing to pay see it as a one-time experience, not something that they will visit year after year. That has led to canceling a number of Galactic Starcruiser voyages in June, July, and August, and that would only happen if demand was soft. Clearly, Disney made a mistake when it came to the idea that no price was too high for its devoted fan base. And that may be somewhat true when it comes to week-long vacations where it's easier to justify the money, but it has not translated to its Star Wars hotel. Now, the article continues on to discuss the recent lineup of discounts that Disney is offering to its annual pass holders. 30% off if you are an annual pass holder for Walt Disney World Resort in Florida. But that's only $1,500 off of a $5,000 price tag. Disney is engaging finally in what I predicted over a year ago at this point that they would absolutely do. Once they felt as though they had run through those early adopters for the $5,000 price tag at the Galactic Starcruiser, we were going to start to see prices come down rather precipitously. And now we are. $3,500 is still very expensive, but I promise you there is another tranche of audience out there that maybe they weren't willing to pay $5,000, but they will pay $3,500. And there will only be so many of those folks as well. Within the next year, you'll probably see voyages get reduced further to $2,500 and $2,000. It's the only way that Disney can keep that going. But of course, there's one bigger problem, and that's the brand of Star Wars that they offer. That's what the article from The Street seems to miss, because a lot of folks out there on Wall Street just look at Star Wars as Star Wars. They're not really seeing it as a fan. And of course, the brand of Star Wars that the Walt Disney Company has invested in is just not the brand that most people want. And I say that with complete certainty because it's become evident in the sales and the interest that has declined from one film to the next, beginning in 2015 with The Force Awakens and crashing at the end in 2019 with The Rise of Skywalker. From the numbers, I've created a simple comparative chart with all 5 of the films that have come from Lucasfilm under the Star Wars brand. And if we look at the lineup, the production budgets from one to the next, I want everybody to take those with a grain of salt, with perhaps the exception of The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi. Rogue One, Solo, A Star Wars Story, and The Rise of Skywalker all came with gargantuan reshoots. The movies, each of them, were 75 to 80% plus complete when major reshoots were ordered, basically going back and reshooting the entire film over again. Those production budgets that you see, from what we now know, do not include a lot of these massive reshoots. And even Gary at Nerdrotic confirmed the other week when the Victoria Alonso situation came down the pike that Marvel had not been including a lot of these massive reshoots for several of their phases 4 and 5 films in the public data that we saw. Not to say that they have to or they're under any requirement to do so, but certainly Marvel Studios was trying to conceal what it was really costing. The same is obviously true for Lucasfilm and Star Wars in this case, because just like Marvel with Victoria Alonso, Lucasfilm has Kathleen Kennedy, and she was just as bad of a production manager as was Alonso. If you look at the cumulative worldwide box office for these films, it looks amazing. $5.7 billion almost. That's an average of just a little over $1 billion per film, and that sounds great, but if you look at the chart more carefully, you can see with each film the returns got smaller and smaller and smaller by and large, with Solo losing a ton of money, hundreds of millions of dollars for the Walt Disney Company, because you have to remember that of that $5.7 billion total box office, the Walt Disney Company only got about half of that back from theaters, both here in the US and globally when you combine the numbers together. And once you account for production budget overruns and then additional spends to market these films, Disney probably had at least $2 billion invested in producing and marketing these films into theaters. That means the cumulative profits on these films is far less than what most people really understand. It's only a few $100 million at that point. And remember, that $2 billion spend to make and market these 5 films was in addition to the $4 billion that Disney spent to acquire Lucasfilm to begin with back in 2012. That's also in addition to another $1 billion to $2 billion that Disney has invested otherwise in Star Wars since the purchase, and in addition to the movies, namely 2 major Galaxy's Edge theme parks and now a big Star Wars hotel. And of course, we've covered before, the merchandise sales for Star Wars has fallen off a cliff in the last several years. Even Baby Yoda and The Mandalorian have seen a drop back, with its nearly 2.5-year hiatus between the premieres of Season 2 and 3. And in the Galactic Starcruiser experience itself, it's all sequel trilogy based, where we saw from one film to the next, the fan base became more disgruntled and divided over it. And yet, that is the brand of Star Wars that Disney chose to promote in its theme parks and its hotel, investments worth billions of dollars for the company, and they bet on the wrong version. They should have just used, as the Street correctly stated, George Lucas's world, but they didn't. They used Disney's world. They used Kathleen Kennedy's Star Wars world, and that's just not what fans want. Imagine if Han, Luke, and Leia were in that hotel and you got to have an adventure with them. How many more $5,000 trips would people have been willing to take and continue to keep that hotel booked to capacity? How many more months, if not years, could Disney have run at those prices? How much more revenue could they have made? Would they be at $3,500 right now for annual pass holders for this? Maybe, but maybe not. It seems like the fans at this point are hungry for real Star Wars again instead of the junk that Disney keeps pumping out. And if Wall Street keeps taking notice of things like this and the bad numbers for Mando Season 3 on Nielsen and SAMBA TV and the ratings measurements, they're going to start asking more and more questions on a more regular basis. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments below. Make sure you go check out the video from this morning on the Nielsen numbers for the Mandalorian Season 3 premiere. They're not good. They may look good on the surface, but of course, we bust through that because on Valiant Renegade, we put Hollywood through the business and financial lens of reality. Take care.